Hello. So, I'm going to talk about the Bill of Rights, the U.S. Bill of Rights, and it's uh, why it's important and why it's an important leftist statement of, foundational statement of leftism, at least. I mean, not that it includes every aspect of early leftism, but it certainly touches on several key points, and like it's still like it's a radical document. It's still. I mean, it would be radical if it were implemented. It would be amazing if it were implemented. Um, but it's hard to say how much it's ever been implemented. um, I mean, it was ratified in 1789, I guess, or thereabouts, or 1790. And well, no, I guess the Bill of Rights was added after the original Constitution, but yeah, it must have been around 1790 or 1791, or maybe it was in 1789. That it was basically like I differentiate the Constitution from the Bill of Rights in the sense that the original Constitution did not have much in it of value to the cause of justice or whatever. It was We were better off under the I believe, for the most part, we were better off under the Articles of Confederation and the Continental Congress, than we would have been under just the Constitution without the Bill of Rights. And I believe there were attempts within the convention, the Constitutional Convention, to add a Bill of Rights to the Constitution, but it was stopped by the majority. And of course, there was a majority of people that were not even delegated to the task of writing a constitution. They were supposed to come together and discuss the exigencies of the this and that, and try to, it was like a very vague mandate, and deliberately so. It was a conspiracy, like a secret conspiracy that created the Constitution. And arguably the main goal of the creation of the Constitution was basically a counter-revolution to undo the freedoms and the rights that were gained during the revolution. And because the Continental Congress was seen as too democratic, too egalitarian, and so the Constitution was meant to give us a king, basically, because we didn't have that's the thing. The Continental Congress, its sort of constitution, you could say, like the Confederation of Articles of Confederation, and I think earlier, I'm not sure if there was an earlier document, but the basis of its powers was much more democratic, because there were presidents during that era. Like, there were presidents of the Continental Congress of the United States during the Revolution, etc. But but nobody knows who they were. I know, I think one of them was Randolph, and because they didn't have any power, like, or they didn't have very much power, like arguably the secretary had the most power, if anything. Um, and even the secretary didn't have much power. Like, it was basically, it was a much more democratic system in that sense, in its overall kind of structure and ethos than our current federal government. So, but the only way that it was accepted at all, and I don't mean like really accepted, like people loved it, but that it could be implemented without an all-out revolution, was that the compromise was the Bill of Rights. The compromise was when what were called the anti-constitutionalists, which were also called sometimes the Republicans, they basically, because they demanded, that was one of their key criticisms of the Constitution, was that it didn't have a Bill of Rights. Like even the British Constitution had a Bill of Rights, and the U.S. Constitution of Hamilton and his right-wing Federalist friends didn't even have that. It just gave powers to the government, and it gave no powers to like the people. So anyway, so that was the necessary compromise between the masses and the elites, the elites who were had control of the government at that time, the Federalists, that people didn't yet fully realize how shady they were. So anyway, like, the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech is, within, there are parameters of freedom of speech, in the sense of like, I think it was always meant to, or I'm not sure that it was ever officially argued to be, absolute, in the sense of like, that it doesn't apply to slander, libel, threats. I don't know. There could still be crimes committed using speech. It's just to say that outside of those crimes, which should be interpreted, those crimes themselves should be interpreted very conservatively. They shouldn't be they should not be applied very very broadly. It should be very careful. Like, there should be basically full freedom of speech outside of that. If it's not like a libel, if it's not slander, if it's not threat or whatever, something like that, like a specific crime, there should be absolute freedom. And but that's like under fire nowadays from primarily the Democratic Party. It's also under fire from the Republicans, a kind of Republican and bipartisan effort, in terms of like BDS, like the anti-Zionist movement, boycott, divest, something. Anyway, like, they try to like censor people talking about BDS on college campuses. So it's not just a Democratic issue, but it is interesting that the Democrats were, at least at some junctures, they've positioned themselves as being the party of free speech. and freedom generally, and the Bill of Rights. And but perhaps more worrying is what we've seen happen to the ACLU over the last at least 4 or 5 years, but maybe it's been a longer process. But they've basically become a wing of the Democratic Party, so they actually are anti-free speech now, whereas before they were the ones who were for free speech for anybody, even like the people they opposed, even their opponents. They were for defending everybody's right to march in the streets and speech, say whatever they want. And now it's the opposite. Now they basically give cover. They've totally abandoned the concept of free speech, and they've, basically given cover to the authoritarianism against, whatever they see as freedoms that, the freedom of the people they don't want, or the freedoms that they don't like, or whatever basically aligns with the Democratic Party. So, and of course, from a lot of the politically correct ideological left, like some of the kind of quote unquote social justice warriors, a lot of them never cared about freedom, like freedom was never part of their thing, because they just are kind of like into demonizing and into like attacking, and that's just not their style to like care about freedom or rights or whatever, at least not except maybe for limited demographics or situations. So, but I think the working class needs the Bill of Rights. Like, we need freedom of speech. We need, the right to bear arms. We need the right to, freedom of religion, freedom of thought. Honestly, I'm not like an expert on all of the Bill of the Rights. I know a bit about the First and Second Amendments. So that's what I'm going to be, focusing on here for the most part. But, I believe that all of the rights enumerated there are very important. But yeah, so free speech, it's just like the folly, the sheer folly and hubris of like, leftists or anybody who just thinks like that they can have the government, they can easily just get the government to like censor whoever they don't want, and that there's nothing that could go wrong with that, or there's no way that could be turned against them or turned against some innocent people, or that it might even be targeting innocent people in the first place. Like nowadays, especially with the global situation that shall not be named over the last year, which I can't even talk about because I've had 2 videos deleted by YouTube for talking about that situation and my opinions on it. But that's the thing. It's like we can't have a public discourse about important issues. And certainly on that issue, like, it's just, it's not a huge surprise that so many ostensibly on the left, and especially the Democrats, like, just so easily sold out, like, everybody on this issue, and just so easily just trash the Constitution because they've done it before. But there is an argument that this is even more egregious than they've been in the past. which is definitely saying something. So like, I don't know. I'm honestly thinking of trying to like make more overtures to the libertarians, like maybe even join the Libertarian Party, just because they seem like they're the only. I mean, I don't know how committed they are either, though. That's the thing. They might be basically like the Dems and the Republicans, like basically a captured party, controlled opposition. But I mean, at least ostensibly, they're committed to the Constitution, which absolutely the Democrats and Republicans are like avowed enemies of. You know, I mean, they won't say that. Some of them actually might say that. Like some of them will say like the Constitution is outdated, terrible document and should be like. But I mean, I'm all for reforming like the bad parts of the Constitution itself, like, but the Bill of Rights. I mean, there might be a way to. I would maybe improve the meaning or improve the wording if I could, like, just to clarify. Because like the Second Amendment, for instance, it's like worded strangely because it's compiled from two, you know, from a longer, like it's a truncated form of like a longer part from the Bill of Rights of Pennsylvania and or Virginia. So when it says like a right to bear arms shall not be infringed. What is it, like a militia being you know, vital to the liberty of the people or something, a free well-regulated militia being, you know, vital to something, therefore the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. So in the original, it wasn't like a therefore exactly. I mean, it was like saying the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, and also that a well-regulated militia is the proper it's the proper mechanism of any kind of, like, it's basically the only constitutional valid force for like violent force of the government, because during peacetime it's basically saying that like we shouldn't have police and we shouldn't have an army is what it's actually saying. So, or, you know, certainly in the original that it's taken from, that's the full, you know, that's the full meaning of it. So clearly this was intended to imply that. Was it deliberately vague so that they could read, you know, different meanings into it? Who knows? But the only like honest, straightforward meaning of it is to read the meaning of, you know, what it was clearly intended to imply, which is the meaning of what it was based on, the right given in the I believe it was the Virginia and or Pennsylvania Constitution, Bill of Rights, which both give the right to bear arms and also say that we shouldn't have a standing army during peacetime because it's inimical to our liberties, and so we should instead have a, you know, free and democratic regulated militia or something. You know, that's I mean, a lot of these militias, it was like citizens militias, basically just the people of, or, you know, at least like the men who were of militia age of that county would basically be the militia. So it was a very democratic thing. There were some militias that excluded poor people and said only taxpayers could be in that militia. And that was for a reason. You know, they had the aristocrats, the rich, basically were very fearful of arming the poor and of giving them any kind of equal footing. So they tended to favor militias that didn't have democracy, for instance, that didn't elect their officers. But yeah, a lot of the militias, you know, they elected their officers, and so that's arguably as important a principle as the the right to bear arms itself, is the principle of not allowing there to be any kind of permanent, you know, standing army, which is what we have, and which is what we've, you know, allowed our government to have, to the detriment of ourselves and of the rest of the world, the rest of the planet. It's like, you know, there's so much written and said by the founding fathers and by people of that, you know, the American revolutionaries about the dangers and the evils of military establishments. You know, having a standing army in peacetime was seen almost universally among the Whigs, among the revolutionaries, as being, you know, a guaranteed path to tyranny. And that's what they had seen happen in Britain, where there wasn't supposed to be a standing army, you know, but the kings and the elites, basically they would just call out an army, establish an army by act of parliament, I guess, for like a year. I think there was like an military act that established it just for a year, and so it wasn't permanent, right? And they would always have some reason. They would say, well, you know, the French are doing this and the Irish are doing this and something. But they did that every single year, and they built up this huge military, you know, like military industrial complex, and, you know, and they built this huge empire, but it was to the detriment of the everyday Britons, you know, and a lot of them ended up being cannon fodder for that military. But anyway, so that's another very important part of the Second Amendment. The other just general part is like, you know, revolution is a thing, and if you think there's no, like, there should always be some recourse if things go, like, let's say the literal, I don't know, like the most evil people you can imagine get hold of government. I mean, I would arguably say they're already in control of government, but let's say they got control of government. Let's say they just started randomly marching people out and lining them up against the wall just for like some stupid reason, like either some thought crime or some, racial thing, or, anything. And the idea that you couldn't have any recourse against them, that there would be no defense, but that's what the Democrats want. Like a lot of Democrats hate people with guns. I mean, there's a lot of Democrats also that have guns, but certainly a lot of the really ideological, quote unquote progressives, whatever, are very anti-gun, and and it shows their authoritarianism. It shows that at the end of the day, they side with the police, you know, and it is largely like poor people and people of color who suffer, you know, who are charged and imprisoned under gun laws, you know, like under these progressive gun laws, which are championed by largely like suburbanite, white, you know, college educated, you know, progressives doing it for the children or whatever. Anyway, so I think this, I'm going to end this video here, but I think that, you know, we need these rights. We need them respected. We need them protected. We need the first to defend the second. We need the second to defend the first. We need the third. We need all of them to defend each other and to defend ourselves, and simply because they are our rights. But they're not being respected. So, you know, there is a document from 1776 by Thomas Jefferson, which describes a similar situation. Anyway, so solidarity, comrades, and folks, and take care. Long live justice, or hopefully it will live again someday.